We're having one more blast of winter, probably not the last blast, but another winter blast. We are going to read, probably we're going to finish this today, the Roswell Report. Case closed. Fascinating story. Let me know if you believe it. This is a government document from the U.S. Air Force. And let me know. I don't know what to think. I know people that have seen UFOs. I've never seen one, but I believe the people that I've met. I believe them. But I don't disbelieve this. This is plausible to me, their explanation of what happened in Roswell in 1947 and then throughout the 50s. I believe it. I don't disbelieve it. But what do you think? What do you think? Here is my shout out, is my teeny weeny safety pin. Someone left a whole bag of these in the mail room. I was so happy to find them because this is an item I always need, and now that the Dollar Tree is going out of business in my neighborhood, I don't know where to get these kind of things. So I took them. Now I have a whole big bag of safety pins that can, just in case I need to MacGyver my way out of something, I'll have the safety pins. And this is my product placement, are my Singer sewing needles. I had to do an emergency surgery yesterday on the hem of a bath towel, came unraveled. How that happened, I don't know. And I wasn't going to pull out the big old sewing machine to fix it, so I just did it by hand. So I had to have my sewing needles. Let's get started. Like I said, today we'll probably finish the Roswell Report, case closed. We are at the conclusion, the section called conclusion. So again, let me know what you think. I'm just dying to know what you think about all of this. So conclusion. When critically examined, the claims that the U.S. Army Air Forces recovered a flying saucer and an alien crew in 1947 were found to be a compilation of many verifiable events. For the most part, the descriptions collected by UFO theorists were of actual operations and tests carried out by the U.S. Air Force in the 1950s. Despite the usual unsavory accusations by UFO proponents of cover-up, conspiracy, intimidation, etc., documented research revealed that many of the activities were actually historic scientific achievements of which the Air Force is very proud. However, other descriptions are believed to be distorted references to Air Force members who were killed or injured in the line of duty. The incomplete and inaccurate intermingling of these actual events were grounded in just enough fact to weave a sensational story, but cannot withstand close scrutiny when compared to official records. To analyze reports of alien bodies that at first appeared to be so offbeat as to not be remotely based in fact, it was necessary to evaluate a wide range of books, interviews, videos, etc., that a less objective review might have rejected out of hand. Only through an inclusive evaluation of these sources were Air Force researchers able to understand the interconnectivity of the widely separated events believed responsible for this incident. And in opposition to critics who believe Air Force research involving this subject is anything but objective, this research relied almost exclusively on the descriptions provided by the UFO proponents themselves. When collected and examined, the actual statements of the witnesses, not the extraterrestrial interpretations of UFO proponents, indicated that something was very wrong. When these descriptions were compared to documented Air Force activities, They were much too similar to be a coincidence. Soon it became apparent that the witnesses or the UFO proponents who liberally interpreted their statements were either one, confused, or two, attempting to perpetrate a hoax, believing that no serious efforts would ever be taken to verify their stories. In preparing this report, attempts were made not to only explain what conclusions were reached, but how they were reached. This undertaking was to try to demystify the research process by outlining the simple and logical research techniques that identified the underlying actual events. In regard to statements of witnesses that were clearly descriptions of Air Force activities, such as those that described anthropomorphic dummies, these could be generously viewed as situational misunderstandings or even honest mistakes. Other descriptions, particularly those believed to be thinly veiled references to deceased or injured Air Force members, are difficult to view as naive misunderstandings. Any attempt to misrepresent or capitalize on tragic incidents in which Air Force members died or were injured in service to their country significantly alters what would otherwise be viewed as simple misinterpretations or honest mistakes. Finally, after reviewing this report, some persons may legitimately ask why the Air Force expended time and effort to respond to mythical, if not comedic, allegations of recoveries of flying saucers and space aliens. To answer these persons, initially, the Air Force was required to respond to an official request from the General Accounting Office. High-altitude balloon research aircraft escape systems and other technologies that were misrepresented as part of the Roswell incident accounted for significant contributions to the knowledge of the atmosphere, to the quest for space flight, and to the defense of this nation. The U.S. Air Force is exceedingly proud of these accomplishments. Distorted and incomplete descriptions of these activities do not pay tribute to these important exploits or to the individuals who, often at great personal risk, boldly carried them out. A sobering reality of the mission of the U.S. Air Force, as evidenced by the aircraft mishaps described in this report, is that defending this nation is a dangerous profession. On a daily basis, members of the U.S. Air Force perform hazardous missions in many locations throughout the world. Unfortunately, these missions sometimes result in injuries or deaths. It is the right and indeed the duty of the Air Force to challenge those who attempt to exploit these human tragedies wherever and whenever they are discovered. The misrepresentations of Air Force activities as an extraterrestrial incident is misleading to the public and is simply an affront to the truth. This comprehensive further examination of the so-called Roswell incident found no evidence whatsoever of flying saucers, space aliens, or sinister government cover-ups. But even if unintentionally, it did serve to highlight a series of events that embodied the proud history of the finest Air Force in the world, the U.S. Air Force. The actual events examined here, rich in human and scientific triumph, tempered by the stark realities of the dangers of the Air Force mission, are but one small portion of that history. The many Air Force activities cobbled together in the ever-changing collage that has become the Roswell incident, when examined in the clear light of historical research, revealed a remarkable chapter of the Air Force story. In the final analysis, this examination simply illustrates once again the fact is indeed stranger and often much more fascinating than fiction. that's the end. And let's see, some of these section notes are just a bunch of tables and graphs, so that's not going to be very fun to read to the internet. So let's see if we can find, I think there's some sworn witness statements here in the book toward the back. Let's see here if we can find some of those. Appendix A, no, Appendix B. Statement of witnesses. So we'll read a few of these. They're not very long. So we'll read a couple of these. Statement of witnesses, December the 26th, 1996. I, Charles Clothier, hereby state that James McAndrew was identified as a captain, U.S. Air Force, on the date of my place of employment, do hereby voluntarily and of my own free will make the following statement. This was done without having been subjected to any coercion, unlawful influence, or unlawful inducement. I was on active duty in the U.S. Air Force and stationed at Walker Air Force Base, Roswell, New Mexico from February 1955 until October 1956. During that time, I was a pharmacist assigned to the base hospital. Following my tour of duty with the Air Force, I returned to my hometown, Farmington, New Mexico, where I became an employee and eventually a co-owner of Farmington Drug. With the exception of the 2 years in the Air Force, I have been a resident of Farmington, New Mexico since 1934. It is my recollection that Dr. Frank B. Nordstrom was the first pediatrician to practice in the Farmington area, and he remained the only pediatrician in Farmington until approximately 1970. I base these recollections on extensive professional and personal contacts with physicians in the Farmington area, and as a father of 2 children who were patients of Dr. Nordstrom's. Also, based on nearly 40 years of contact with physicians in the Farmington area, I believe that Dr. Nordstrom is the only physician who served a tour of duty at Walker Air Force Base. During the 1960s, I became aware of that Dr. Nordstrom had also served at Walker Air Force Base Hospital. At various times in the ensuing years, Dr. Nordstrom and I reminisced about our service at Walker Air Force Base. During these conversations, Dr. Nordstrom never mentioned any activities during his tour of duty I considered unusual or that might explain reports of bodies or aliens. During the time I was stationed at Walker Air Force Base, I did not witness nor did I hear rumors of anything that involved flying saucers, aliens, or anything else of extraterrestrial nature. I am not part of a conspiracy to withhold information from either the U.S. government or the American public. There is no classified information that I am withholding related to this inquiry, and I have not been threatened by the U.S. government persons concerning talking about this matter. Okay, that was statements witness, the first one. Let's see here. We can read the next statement witness by dated November the 25th, 1995. I, Charles A. Coltman, Jr., Colonel, U.S. Air Force, retired, hereby state that James McAndrew was identified as a lieutenant of the Air Force on this date at my place of employment and do hereby voluntarily and of my own free will make the following statement. This was done without having been subjected to any coercion, unlawful influence, or unlawful inducement. I entered the U.S. Air Force in 1957 as a flight surgeon and was assigned to Walker Air Force Base, New Mexico in 1958. Following a residency at Ohio State University from 59 to 63. Hello, good to see you, Shebar in Pakistan. Happy that you're here. I was assigned to Wilford Hall, U.S. Air Force Medical Center, Lackland Air Force Base, Texas, where I eventually became the chairman. Yes, I'm doing great. Good to see you. Chairman of the Department of Medicine. I retired from the Air Force in 1977. I am presently a professor at the University of Texas Health Science Center at San Antonio and Chief Executive Officer of the Cancer Therapy and Research Foundation of South Texas. I remember a balloon crash that happened north of Roswell, New Mexico in May of 1959, I received a phone call from NCOIC of the flight surgeon's office who informed me of the crash. The thank you very much. The NCOIC, Earl Wormwood, came to my quarters and we drove in an old blue Air Force Cracker Box ambulance to the crash site. I remember the gondola laying on its side and the deflated balloon on the ground. The crew members were sitting next to the gondola. I examined the pilots and determined they were not seriously injured. They told me they were practicing touch and goes, and a gust of wind had dumped them on the ground, and the gondola struck one of the pilots in the head. Hello, good to see you. Leave your links in the chat so we can check you out. Also present were the Air Force technicians in trucks. Hey, baby world, good to see you. Who tracked the balloon. The injured pilots were transported to the flight surgeon's office at the hospital at Walker Air Force Base. The injury sustained by the crew member was a head abrasion, contusion, and hematoma. The hematoma caused the patient's head to swell. However, it was not serious enough for him to be admitted. I remember receiving a call from Colonel Dr. John Stapp. Oh, okay. Your problem here because, that's right, Oompaville. I like Oompaville. He's a very funny person. I enjoy watching his videos. I was very surprised when he watched my videos. I never know who's really watching until they leave me a comment or something. But it was very, very pleasant surprise to hear from Oompaville. And I'm grateful that he threw a lot of business my way. He's very great. Yes, Oompaville is fun. Hi, Svetlana. Good to see you. The injured pilots were okay, we got that. Okay. Dr. Stapp inquired about the injuries to the pilots, and he wanted them returned to Holloman Air Force Base as quickly as possible. The hospital was an old World War II cantonment-type building with long corridors and a capacity of 50 beds. I do not recall a nurse assisting me in the treatment of the patient, although a nurse may have been on duty and observed the patient. I was the only doctor in the hospital that morning. There were no visiting doctors from other bases or facilities. I do not remember any altercations or arguments that day. During my time at Walker, I do not recall that any autopsies were performed at the hospital, since we do not have a pathologist on staff. I do recall any remains brought to the hospital in body bags or wreckage transported in the back of an ambulance. There may have been remains brought to the hospital in body bags after KC-97 crash, but that was before I arrived at Walker. Dr. Ed Bradley was involved in the recovery of the remains. At no time was there ever any involvement of the Walker Air Force Hospital with UFOs or space aliens. I know this to be true because the hospital was very small and had a small staff. And if any activity other than normal hospital functions had occurred, I would have known about it. I'm not part of any conspiracy to withhold or provide misleading information to the United States government or the American public. There is no classified information that I am withholding related to this inquiry, and I have never been threatened by U.S. government persons concerning refraining from talking about this matter. Okay, so let's see. These are all just more of the witness statements that just reiterates all of that. So let's see, we'll read some of this transcript of interview with Gerald Anderson, alleged first-hand witness to the crash site, 2, allegedly 175 miles northwest of Roswell. A, we drove down to the plains of San Agustin, which is west of Socorro, New Mexico, in the Magdalena Datil area. We were down there looking for banded and moss agate, which according to my Uncle Ted and my cousin Victor was prevalent in the area. My brother, being an amateur rock hound, had wanted to get some of this. That was a way of showing us around the area. They had relatives down in Magdalena that they wanted to introduce us to. So we had gone down there, and we got down to the Horse Springs area and had driven off into the plains down an old rutted road for a mile or so, and it seemed like a long ways. We parked the car, got out of the car, and walked down a hillside. There's a semi-forest, I guess you could say. It had pinyon trees and scrub oak and stuff like that on it. And we walked, well, not scrub oak, but cedar, and walked down the hillside into an area, a dry wash, and then walked south down a dry wash toward where the agates were supposed to be at. As we came round a bend in the area that had a pinyon and cedar trees growing, we were able to see farther ahead down the area, and on the next ridge line there was a large silver disc-shaped object was embedded in the side of the ridge line. There was debris and wreckage strewn about the area. Mainly this thing was intact. I would estimate its size from an adult perspective to something like 35 feet in diameter. I've heard other people who were there say they thought it was like 50 feet. But as an adult, I would say about 35 feet in diameter, quite large. When we got up to it, there were 4 bodies there, not human. There was 2 of them there, were obviously dead. One of them was obviously very badly injured, and one of them apparently suffered no ill effects or didn't appear to be injured, and was ambulatory, was mobile. It was just sitting there next to the one. Question: were they right next to the vehicle? Answer: right next to it, right under the edge of it, and this craft had apparently come in from the east and bounced off one ridge line, plowing through the area, and then crashed into the ridge line and embedded itself. They were sitting back under the edge. It was kind of a tilted up like this, and they were sitting back under the edge here. And I'm assuming that this one creature that was all right had laid his material on the ground, but it looked like unrolled tinfoil that these other 3 creatures were laying on. Like it was trying, like you do a person in shock, put them on a blanket, that kind of thing. And apparently it had some boxes there around it, and had apparently been trying to give first aid or help these other creatures when we first got there. As we approached, the creature drew back like this, like it was in a fear, like we were going to hurt it. And it was very long, we were just trying to communicate with it. The adults were. It seemed to calm down and just sat there and kind of looked back and forth, watching them, apparently trying to figure out what was going on. Question: what did it look like? A little bit more. Answer: these creatures, all of them, were about 4 foot tall, 4.5 feet tall. They had very large heads. They were shaped larger on the top, and they kind of tapered down. Not to a real sharp point, but just tapered down where they were thin. And they were very large, oval shaped and almond shaped, I guess you could say black eyes. The head, they were so shiny. They had almost a bluish tint to them when the light reflected off of them. Their skin, hi, good to see you, History and Literature, good to see you. Leave your link in the chat so we can visit you. They were shiny. They had almost bluish tint in them when the light reflected off of them. Their skin coloration, oh, thank you. Their skin coloration, the best way I could describe that is it was kind of a bluish tinted milky white. It looked like someone in shock. And the ones that were laying on the ground were really looked more that way, more blue and light, Question: how about ears, nose, mouth? Answer: no. There were no visible ears on the creatures, except like if you just cover your ear like this, to where there was just a rise there and then a hole without, your earlobe or the rest of the area. Question. How about nose? Answer. It was, the nose was very, very small, almost imperceptible. It's like two holes straight in, and the lips were just a straight line. It was like a cut, and you couldn't see just the lips like we have. It was just a slit in. Question. What hair color? Sound. A. Pardon. Answer. Question. What hair color? Answer. There was no hair. They were completely bald. Question. And no sounds? Answer. I never heard a sound, not out of any of the creatures, including the one that was questioned. Did you see the fingers? Answer. Yes. They had fingers like this. They didn't have a little finger. They just had the thumb and 3 extra digits, except the center digit was longer, and the other 2 were about the same size. They were very long and slender and looked very delicate, and I made the statement before, and I'll make it again. I think we would have made an excellent violinist because the structure of their hands. They were wearing one-piece suits. All of them were dressed exactly the same. It was sort of real shiny silverish gray color. Question. No zippers, buttons? Answer. No. I saw no zippers, no buttons. Question. Insignias? No. Answer. No. No insignias. The only thing that was different, and they all had this, but the only that was different from the silvery gray thing, the suit, was that down like a seam line. Like there was a seam on the shoulder and around the collar. It was trimmed in what appeared to be maroon, like cording. Then the suits were continuous with their footwear. We could see right down this area down. It seemed to be less pliable than it was up here. Like this was a stiffer area, like they were boots or shoes or something. But they were all dressed exactly the same. Question. Okay. So you and your family were talking back and forth, wondering what was going on. What did your family say? Answer. Question. Did they say anything? Answer. Yes. My brother, one of his first remarks, I heard him say, that's a damn spaceship. There were bodies up there, and I was told not to go up there, which I did. And question. How old was your brother at the time? Answer. He was in his early 20s, I think 20, 21, something like that. Question. He was a lot older than you were? Answer. Oh, yes, considerably. When we got up there, I kind of meandered off to one side. This thing was cocked up, and I was standing here. The bodies were here, and everybody else was kind of down here, except my cousin Victor was over here playing and looking in this gaping hole on the side of his disc. And it was shaped just like a discus, except for a round dome was up on the top, and there was this big gaping gash in there. We could see inside, and it looked like a double hull. Question. How big? Explain it. The gash. A. Answer. The dome? Question. No, the gash. Answer. Well, it covered the greater majority from the center of the craft out. It was just like a gaping hole in there. I'm thinking, it's like 25, 30 to 35 feet in diameter. So we're talking about 17 feet. Maybe. Most of that one side was ripped open like that. You could see inside, and you could see another double hole like in there, and there were just rows of components that was on there. And there were lights that flashed on and off. Some of them were steady and some of them were flashing. There was a lot of debris and stuff hanging out of the hole. There was evidence that there apparently had been fire. It looked like it had been burned along the edge there, the gash. Question. Now, this wasn't a gash that could have been caused by the thing coming in for the ground. It wasn't at the leading edge of the vehicle. Answer. No. This was in the side, like it almost appeared it was elliptical. It almost appeared as if something the same shape as the disc we were looking at had hit it that same, like it hit the disc and left an imprint that pretty closely approximated the outside diameter of the disc itself. And it appeared to be caved in looking, kind of like it hit them like this and just it crumpled and caved in and ripped it open. Question. Okay, so you're there, you take all this in, everybody is mystified. What were the circumstances outside? Hot, cold? Answer. Very, very hot. Incredible to me, being the first time in New Mexico and coming from back east. I had dry heaves. It was like the inside of an oven. It was unbelievable to me. You know, the odd part about this was the closer you got to it, the cooler it was. And standing under it, the shade there next to the creatures' bodies, it was like a refrigerator, air conditioning. And did you feel air coming out of this thing? Answer, no. It was just like it was inaudible. And I remember reaching up and putting my hand on the side of it, but I think I was afraid I was going to hit my head because there wasn't enough room for me as a small child, you know. I was approximately the same size as these creatures to walk up under there and stand there, but I kind of did like that, put my hand up against this thing. Question, what did it feel like? Answer, it was ice cold. It felt like it just came out of the freezer. Question, was it smooth? Was it rough? Answer, it was very smooth. It had very smooth texture to it. It was obviously made out of metal. It was very solid and it was very cold, ice cold. And there was a smell in the area. It smelled volatile, acrid, like acetone. And that seemed to be coming out of that gash, that smell. But the closer you got to this thing, the cooler it was. So, you know, I kind of remained there. And I guess that while they were over here, my father and my Uncle Ted and my brother, Uncle Ted was trying to talk to this thing in Spanish. And of course it didn't understand a word he said. And Dad tried to talk to it, and then they tried, you know, sign language, and that didn't work. And I don't know, for some reason I reached down and touched it. This one that was laying next to me. When I touched it, I realized and jumped back. It scared me. It startled me because I suddenly realized that these weren't dolls. I thought they were plastic dolls, and well, you know, it was still in my mind that these were dolls until I touched it, and then I realized, you know, this was a dead thing. I'd seen dead relatives before, and unfortunately made a mistake one time in touching a relative that was in a casket, and I just knew that this was a dead thing, and it scared me, and I ran around behind my father and my uncle, and this thing was sitting there on the ground, and it kept looking back and forth, and it just had its hands like this in its lap, and I just kept looking back and forth between the three of them, and like I was trying to understand. And all of a sudden it just turned and looked right straight at me between my Uncle Ted and myself. And this is when it was just like an explosion of things in my head. I started, you know, feeling just terrible depression and loneliness and fear and just, you know, awful, awful feelings that just suddenly burst into my mind there. I don't know if that meant that it was communicating with me and I was the only one there that it could communicate with because I was a kid. I don't know. I turned and ran across the area and up on the area that it bounced off. And during the crash, I was just standing there looking down at the scene, you know, at my family, and off in the distance I could see cattle grazing. I could see a windmill, and I could see dust trails out on the plains out there. And I was there for a while, and I came back down. I guess we were there. Victor was, when I got back down there, Victor was up in the craft, and Ted yelled at him to get out of there. And Glenn went over and grabbed him by the belt and jerked him around. Question, that's your brother? Answer, yes. And jerked him off, says, get out because this thing may explode and kill us all, you know? And then, of course, he went prowling around in there. I was kind of standing off to one side looking. That's why I knew that there was, I can look off these rocks that I was standing on and look right into this thing. That's why I knew, you know, about the lights and the components and stuff. And then I heard the other people talking. I turned and there was a group of people coming up the area from on the plains from the south. They had come up there, and of course they walked up. and was talking. Question, how many? Answer, there was an older man and 5 younger students. Question, boys or girls? Answer, 3 boys and 2 girls. And they were all, introducing, talking to my father and my uncle and my brother. Question, what did the older one look like? Hi, good to see you, Svetlana. Yes. Answer, he was very tall, a very big man. He was wearing a pith helmet when he first came up, one of those kind of explorer helmets. And he was bald, and I know that because he had taken it off and he had, wiped it with a handkerchief and put it back on. He was a balding man, and he had a round face. He was very ruddy. He was very ruddy, completed, a big man, and he apparently was a doctor because they kept calling him doctor. And it was my understanding that it was an archaeological group that was out there on some kind of summer thing. And they talked, and he apparently was able to speak several foreign languages, and he tried to talk to this creature in several times in different languages, and again, to no avail. Question, how did they happen to be there? Had they seen the thing? Answer, well, they claim they said they saw this thing come down the night before in flight, and they thought it was a meteorite. And they had talked about, well, early in the morning, we'll go over and see this, where this meteor came down, because that's what they thought it was. And when the sun came up the next morning, and they got about their business, got up, and somebody looked over and said, they saw this shiny metal and stuff across the plains there, and they realized it wasn't a meteorite. It may have been an airplane that crashed, so they decided to go over there and see if there was anybody left alive, that was hurt and that needed help. Question, they had driven over? Answer, no, they walked over, apparently, the way I understood it. And it's quite a ways across the plain, so it had to take a very long time to do this, or they may have had a vehicle. I don't know. That's an assumption, I think, on my part, where they walked. Question, okay, so they're around. Answer, but they came across. Question, with the family? Answer, the planes. I don't know why I said that. I'm not sure if they drove or not. I didn't hear any cars. Question, and then somebody else shows up? Answer, yes, they were down just 15, maybe 20 minutes tops, Yes. And they were picking up things. Some of the students and this Dr. Buskirk, that they called him, this one girl went up and said, look, doctor, look, doctor, wouldn't this make a beautiful ring? And she was holding what looked like a red rod, a red tube that was some kind of silvery red. And he kind of snapped at her, put that down, because you don't know what that thing is. That thing could hurt you. Don't pick this stuff up. And she kind of said, well, yes, okay, doctor. And then he went back to what he was doing, and she walked away and put it in her pocket. And a lot of them were doing this sort of picking up things and feeling things. I was picking up things and feeling things. It was all kinds of material and metal, stuff like that. I heard it. Well, we all heard it, the sound of a motor coming like a truck. And I went back up the incline area to the ridgeline, and I could see out there was a truck coming up. It was an old pickup truck. It was sort of a beige color and tan colored van with an antenna on it, and it stopped, and this guy got out. He's wearing brown clothes. He's got boots on, and he's wearing a straw hat, just like the kind that Harry Truman wore, and he had wire-rimmed glasses. He was a big man, and he looked exactly like Harry Truman to me. I'd seen him in the Movie Tone News. Question, he was president then? Answer, yes, I was well aware who Harry Truman was. Everybody was. He was kind of a hero, and he just kind of looked like him, except bigger. I don't think he didn't look as old either. His hair was kind of light gray. And he walked over there, and they got to talking, with everybody, and he told them that they worked out on the plains out there, and that he made maps, and that he had seen the wreckage from out there on the plains. And he saw the people, and he thought it was a plane wreck, and that's something, something was going on, and he came over to see. And he hadn't been there but just a very, very few minutes when we heard all kinds of motors and engines straining and stuff. And here comes a military car and a big white star on the side, and it followed by 6, by which is a military truck with a kind of canvas wagon, kind of canvas thing over it, and it's full of soldiers, and they've got guns. And right behind them is what we call a 4x4, which is like a medium-sized Jeep or truck situation, and it had two big high whip antennas, all kinds of radio gear in the back. And the guy came back there with earphones and stuff on, and he's, working these radios, and they all pulled up and stopped. Question: which direction did they come from? Do you know? Answer: they come from the north, from the Horse Springs area, right? Question: so they could have come from the highway there? Answer: oh yes, I'm sure that's exactly how they got there. They came off the highway the same way we did. Well, in the meantime, when the stop, this black soldier, this sergeant, the reason I know, he was a sergeant, my brother told me he was, and he got out of his car, and then the guy got out of the other side, and he was Glenn, said the captain. He told me later he was a captain, and this guy had orange and red hair, so all the soldiers and them came running over there, pointing guns at people, telling them, get away, get away, get away, and when this creature saw the people, the military, he went nuts. He went into an absolute panic, worse than what he did when he saw us. Let's stop there for today. Wow, this is so chilling. That's such a cliffhanger. Even though the report said that it was just a balloon, I'm reading this guy's report, and it doesn't, I don't know what to think now. I'm all turned around. Oh, that's crazy. We're reading the Roswell Report, case closed. We are pretty much done. We're just in the appendices now, reading eyewitness statements and affidavits and stuff that was gathered by the Air Force. So we'll read the rest of that maybe later tomorrow. That is just so fascinating. I hope you're having a great day. Here is my shout out, is my safety pins. Teeny weeny safety pens. You can use these for a million things. What a useful item, just like a binder clip. Someone left a big bag of these in my mail room, and I took them because it's one of those items that you just kind of need. When you need it, you need it. And now that the Dollar Tree in my area is closing, I don't know where I'm going to find this kind of stuff. So I should have a lifetime supply of safety pins now, unless something goes terribly wrong. And this is my product placement, is my Singer sewing needles. I had to do some emergency surgery the other day, and I had to pull out my sewing kit, and I sewed and I fixed it. So we're back in business. Let me know you were here so I can visit your channel. As always, I want to see what you're up to. I saw some really familiar names like Svetlana, so happy to see you. Visit each other, check each other's channel out, support each other. I saw someone from Upaville. That's a very welcome sight to see. And you guys check out Upaville. He's a big YouTube channel that stumbled across my YouTube channel and gave me a review, which led a lot of people to my channel, so I'm very grateful for him. He's a funny guy. You just have to take him with a grain of salt. I don't think he means any harm, but he does seem, if you just can't take anything seriously. It's not meant to be taken seriously. I know a lot of people become offended with those kinds of channels, but it is what it is. We're all here to just have a good time, right? So give me a kiss. Happy Sunday. Have a wonderful week ahead. I hope you have a great week, and I will see you soon. Have a good day. Bless, bless.